seats. Thank you. I want to just preliminary remind everybody. I want to remind everybody to please pay attention if you have a cell phone. Please be sure that it's off so that we don't disturb or interrupt our speaker. So Deborah, if you please get seated so we can begin. We are blessed to have with us this year as our keynote speaker, Ruth Messenger, President of the American Jewish World Service, probably the world's leading Jewish organization, working to end poverty and realize human rights in the developing world. So last night, most of you were probably there, and Ruth did the board, and she talked about rootedness. She talked about the importance of tree roots in holding together the earth and using tree roots to do quite literal tikkun, the literal repair of the earth. It seems to me our own roots work the same way, and Ruth offers us a model of rootedness in Jewish values. Jewish values like seeing the light in the soul of every human being, loving one another, working tirelessly to end oppression, repairing the earth. In short, the work of Tikkun Olam. Ruth's Tikkun Olam is not a vague or ethereal one, but is rooted in and integrates all four worlds, landing squarely in the world of Asiyah, where her work makes significant and real difference in the lives of millions. Ruth's 36-year career in Tikkun Olam has included consulting with the State Department, serving on the boards of many, many NGOs, too many to mention, working to end genocide in Darfur, and advocating for the rights of women and LGBTQ people in the developing world. Ruth has received honorary degrees from 5 American rabbinical seminaries, serves on the board of Hazon, and is active in her congregation, I guess when you have time. Ruth is, in the truest sense of the word, a rodefet shalom, doing the work of justice through love and the work of love through justice, as Rabbi Eli said this morning, and by merging those two midot, doing the work of shalom. So in the tradition that Reb Zalman created, or brought forth, the tradition of acknowledging Rodef and Rodefet Shalom. Ruth, if you please come on up here. We want to present you with a certificate. It's a certificate of recognition presented to Ruth Messenger as Rodefet Shalom for a lifetime commitment to Tikkun Olam and the pursuit of Shalom on behalf of Ohalah. So we are honored, Ruth, to present you with this. You are as excited as I am to learn from Ruth. I'm hard-pressed to think of a better keynote speaker for a conference on Tikkun Olam. Welcome, Ruth. We are so glad and honored to have you with us.
So, thank you, and my thanks, first of all, to all of you for inviting me at this very special meeting of your group in this special year. My thanks for the certificate, and I'm glad that the certificate is descriptive as opposed to honorary. because you talked about my honorary rabbinic degrees. I want you to know I have 3 children. They have, between and among them, 3 masters and 2 doctorates, and they think there's nothing worse than the fact that I keep collecting these honorary degrees. So I'm very glad that this is a more practical acknowledgement, but I really appreciate the honor. Thank you very much, Eli, and all of you for the honor this morning of being here, and I thank Dee Herman for lending me her talks. Thank you, Phyllis. Okay. I know those of you who were there early on in the beginning of last evening's Mari service, where there was a lot of discussion about the wildness and liveliness of this group. I can attest to that because I want to say that since last night until this morning, which is not very much time, I've had 3 people stop me to challenge me with issues and questions about Haiti or to tell me their connections to Haiti. And in a miracle, which obviously is what you are all responsible for, 2 people who gave me donations. I would like to just ask, I know there are, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 or more of you. Many of you I know from various connections, but there are people who are part of this group who have, I was going to say done time, but that doesn't sound like it. who have been part of AJWS programs, who have traveled with us on, in the rabbinic delegation with our Global Justice Fellowship, who have worked closely with us. And I just would like for all of them to both wait before you do it, to stand now, but then later on when we get into discussion, to please feel free to honor some of their, to offer some of their experiences, remembrances, and challenges. But would all the AJWS connected people stand? Good. Thank you. Very, very much. So you are known to me, Rabbi, in the renewal tradition, as people who have historically taken a leadership in movements for social justice. You're progressive thinkers. You're people who try very hard in your daily work to advance Jewish discourse on key social and environmental issues, which makes me nervous speaking to you. In your work and in your writing, you are people who honor already the interconnectedness of all creatures and who speak to that unbreakable relationship among the physical, spiritual, ethical, and moral spheres of life. You are people who recognize in yourselves, in each other, and in every person in the world the divine sparks, who regularly commit yourselves and your followers to doing more for a more just world. The problem is, however, that we all know there's more to do. You have come here today, I mean, at this conference, at this time, to think more about our responsibility, our collective responsibility to repair the world, to consider what we learned from the past, what needs our attention now, and how we might best do this work into the future. And as I said last night, I feel it necessary, hoping not to lose the attention of anyone in the room, to acknowledge that we are coming together at an unbelievably tough time. And I'm going to enumerate what I mean by that, not because I want you to feel each one is a new burden on your shoulders, but because you are all engaged with the Jewish people in places all over this country, Canada, elsewhere, and they are beset by one or more of these horrors, terrors, and if we don't acknowledge them, then it's very hard to be able to work together to change them. So we come together at a time when our own country is newly torn apart over issues of racism and police violence, when there are ugly explosions of international terrorism and religious extremism, not only in what we at AJWS often call the so-called developing world, but in the very developed world. When there are, of course, ongoing and intense differences in Israel and the Middle East, when there are assaults on the human rights of LGBT populations, most dramatically, but not exclusively in Africa, when there are, as so many of you have devoted your life to reminding us, growing problems with the environment, an issue of particular focus and concern to AJWS now, the worst Ebola pandemic in history, much of it caused by people in the so-called developed world. And when there are, as I will reference later on, rising possibilities of a new genocide in Burma. So probably, if I mentioned a few things that weren't already on your mind, you're sorry I did. And I acknowledge that. But we are in a world that needs healing, and while none of us can tackle all of these issues, each of us needs this opportunity to dedicate and rededicate ourselves to this effort of healing. So here's what I want to do, and I really appreciate your organizers for having given me some time this morning. I want to talk a little bit about what motivates me and about how we at American Jewish World Service define our work in the world. I want to tell you stories about our work, as I did last night, about people who are in fact healing their pieces of the world with, in most instances, none of the resources at their disposal that we have. And I want to convince you, be already convinced, that it is always possible to make a difference. I'm also going to let you know some of what we're doing not only in the Global South, but in Washington. Because I want to talk to you about some of the ways in which we would like you to help, about some of the very specific things that each and every one of you could do with AJWS if you were so inclined. And finally, I'm going to allow time for your questions, challenges, and for what I hope will be some discussion and debate. Okay? Okay. In the second decade of the 21st century, I have to comment on that introduction, wherever Ed is. I am as old as I look, so it's actually more than 36 years of work doing this. And however we count it, I would like to say that it's close to 60 years of doing the work. Of course, I started in kindergarten. No, I didn't. But here we are anyway in the second decade of the 21st century, and I stand here as a proud Jewish advocate for human rights. I stand here with a keen understanding of the past, a powerful stake in the present, and a hopeful eye on the future. I spend my days joining with like-minded Jews and with people of almost every possible background to fight for human rights for people in some of the poorest countries in the world, in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. That's what American Jewish World Service does. We are dedicated to the fight for the human rights of some of the people who have the least access to power. Sadly, that's a very large swath of the world. Women and girls in virtually every country where we work. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals and organizations. Indigenous people whose land and whose culture are threatened. The universe in the world of people who are immigrants or refugees. Side note, since we all have to always look at our biases, when I came to AJWS 16 years ago, I really thought, I'm sorry if many of you are much smarter than this, but I really thought of immigrants as people who came to America, because I knew my immigrant story, only to discover that probably one of the largest groups in the world, a group that some academicians call the Fourth World, are the people who are in some way either displaced from their homes and living in their own countries as internally displaced persons, or who have made it across a border and are living someplace that they don't want to because of the oppression in their own communities. We at AJWS, and I think many of you, do this work, do the work that we do proudly. We do it as Jews, for Jewish reasons, in Jewish ways, with a Jewish vision for repairing the world. And we do it as Jews who understand that international human rights, a set of principles and international agreements, are actually the most essential instrument of action that we have available to us today. So we can make a difference with this group, we can make a difference for these people, but if we want to actually move the needle on the world, we're going to have to look at some of those human rights laws and policies and practices and sometimes budgets. Because human rights help us ensure that all people are protected protected from abuse by states, protected from abuse by other actors, whether we're talking about limits on the right to free expression, or denial of livelihoods, or ethnic cleansing and genocide. When human rights are realized, they enable all people, no matter who they are, where they live, or what government or set of laws they live under, to live full, meaningful lives that they can then shape as they wish. And of course, as I know that you know, for American Jewish World Service, the people whose rights we fight for come from other cultural and religious backgrounds. They are people of many different faiths and of no faith or philosophy. They are people from many different philosophies, many different backgrounds, but they are all human beings for whom the scales of justice are out of balance. The gay man threatened with the death penalty for loving someone of the same sex. The indigenous woman in Guatemala whose entire family was murdered by the military. The young Indian woman who is suffering sexual abuse at the hands of her much older husband. For me and for AJWS, this pursuit, the pursuit to correct the out-of-balance scales of justice for those individuals and hundreds of thousands of others like them, is inspired by Jewish history and tradition. And we all have our sense of which text to quote. This is a conference about Tikkun Olam, and I am not alone. You are all part of the effort where people suggest that that's an overworked phrase. So you pursue your notion of what is Jewish about this work, each of you, with your own text and your own Torah. For me, a central insight of Judaism is B'Tselem Elohim. The notion that all things and people are connected because we all emanate from one creator, a creator who made us all in the same image. The consequence, not to be tread on lightly, is that people are all equal, of equal value, and fully deserving of dignity, which for me is a synonym for human rights. And it's a directive for what I talked about last night, which is learning to listen and learning to let the people in the situations of poverty, of hunger, of oppression, of injustice speak for themselves about their way out. So for me, it's the power of this commitment to the individual, it's the force of our own particular history of oppression, and it's the strength of our prophetic tradition, which are inspirations for the work that we do. And because it is a global world, and because it is in fact all interconnected, we do this work to the greatest extent possible, for everyone in need, and with everyone who shares those goals, whatever their religion or their nationality. Now that's sort of already, I hope it'll become clearer how we do that work in other countries with people of other cultures. But I want to say here, a little bit ahead of when I get to that, as part of my remarks, that the work we do in Washington, which we hope to engage all of you, is multi-faith work. It is work with secular proponents of human rights. And I hope this doesn't upset too many of you, it is work to which people who are in every possible way our next door neighbors, I don't mean theoretically or figuratively, I mean literally, are astounded to find Jews. Okay? Am I clear about that? We know who we are, we know what we believe, we know what our tradition is. But it is not just the farmer in Uganda who responds and asks questions about Jews and Judaism. It is prominent faith-based and secular organizations in Washington, D.C. who share a policy agenda with us and who say we didn't know that Jews cared about these issues. So I got to that thought a little early, but I want to return to it and I want you to hold it in mind. So what I've been saying was, of course, brilliantly said by some of you and by many others before me. I just wanted to quote Elie Wiesel, who said, "Human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere." I don't think there's any shorter statement of what I'm saying. Human suffering everywhere concerns men and women. Human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere. So, a little bit more about me. I was very lucky. You know what Warren Buffett calls this? Calls this the ovarian lottery. When he's talking about being as rich as he is, I don't have that particular claim. But I was very lucky. I was born here in the United States in a family that took its Jewish communal commitment to tzedakah seriously. And I was most fortunate, you don't all know this story, but some of you know it very well, to know and learn as a family friend from Rabbi Heschel. I knew Dr. Heschel because my mother, Oliver Scholem, worked at the Jewish Theological Seminary. She didn't just work at the seminary. She worked at the seminary for 55 years. She was the director of public relations before there was such a field. She was the director of radio and television. And for those few of you in the audience who are old enough, my mother was the co-producer of The Eternal Light. You have no idea what that is. It's too bad, not because you would have loved my mother even more, but because it was a time, astoundingly, when there was, thank you NBC, when there was a national radio program and then a national television program talking about a particular religion to adherents of that religion and to others in a way that really helped to define Judaism and Jews for Jews and for a broader American public. So because Rabbi Heschel was at the seminary, I got to be exposed to him as well as some other seminary thinkers. It was incredibly important to me. I know it's